All right, before we actually get all the news for 2024, I figured I would talk a little bit about some of the rumors of what we're expecting to happen next year. So I kind of talked about this at the end of my final video on the 2023 CrossFit Games, but that video was 30 minutes long and I figured not everyone saw it. So I decided to just break it out into its own little video about changes coming for 2024. And I have some things now, some information that I didn't have then. So maybe it's a slightly more informed version of that. So we'll start first with the thing that we know 100%, well, I never want to say something's 100%. What we know is like 95% happening, and that is the location of the 2024 CrossFit Games will not be Madison, Wisconsin. So back at the beginning of 2023, they had announced that the CrossFit Games was moving out of Madison and 2023 was going to be the last year. And that's what we all anticipated. Then they went back on that, changed it and said, you know what? 2024 is going to be our last year in Madison. Then the Saturday before the CrossFit Games, last Saturday of July, they announced, wait, no, 2023 is our last year in Madison. We are moving. So, as of right now, we believe that the CrossFit Games will not be in Madison, Wisconsin in 2024. And there were mentions during the Games coverage that 2023 was the last year in Madison. Even during some of the events saying this is our last time in North Park ever after the last individual event. So, last year in Madison, where are we going next? That's the big question. And there's been some speculation that it's going to be overseas. Dave Castro kind of put that to rest.
Laying the groundwork and foundation for being able to take this overseas is some of what we're doing in the future years. And so we will eventually take it overseas sooner than later, but just not yet.
So the idea that it's going to be overseas at some point. It's not 2024. Castro made that fairly clear. And in my experience, Dave Castro has been pretty honest. Now, sometimes he'll say things in a way that is vague, specifically vague, so that things could go either way. What you heard there was not vague. It was pretty straightforward that it's not happening this coming year, but they want to set up a future where the CrossFit Games goes overseas. I think next year would be a mess because still, most of the athletes that compete at the CrossFit Games, even though it's international sport, most of them are based in the United States. Even some that are from overseas, someone like Tia Claire Toomey, someone like Roman Krennikov, now live here in the United States. So I think to make it as complicated as putting it somewhere people may need a visa doesn't make sense next year and on such short notice. I imagine when it goes overseas, we will likely have at least a year's notice, at least knowing at the previous games that is going to be in this overseas location for the next games, where we don't know that now, so I think it's just too late to know that. And Castro made pretty clear it's going to be somewhere different, but not overseas. So think continental US. So what are some of our options? Well, one of the first ones that continues to pop up is the one we thought it was going to go to temporarily earlier this year, and that is Birmingham. Although I think Birmingham is kind of quieted down a little bit. I think we're starting to see things point more towards Texas, and I've heard Fort Worth. Austin would probably also be an interesting area, although that's where the Rogue Invitational already is, so I'm not sure if we would see two competitions in the exact same location. But Fort Worth is something I've heard a little bit about, and I think that would be a pretty interesting location because it's Fort Worth, Dallas, DMA, and that's a big market. I live in the Bay Area, and Dallas-Fort Worth is bigger than the Bay Area. So you have a lot of flights there. It's more accessible than Madison was, and there'll be plenty of hotels. It'll be able to be somewhere people can travel more easily and likely more cost effectively. So I think somewhere like that would be awesome. I think one of the differences is that if you've been to the games in Madison, the whole city becomes CrossFit Games Central, and everyone is excited to see the games happening. The city is on board with it. It's a big event for the city of Madison. I've lived in Madison. I lived there when the games were there. I worked at a news station. Like, we covered the games coming. It was a major event for the city. Prior to the games being in Madison, it was in Carson, California, and that's the LA area. And it wasn't a big deal there. Like, when you're in Madison for the games, everyone's like, oh, all the CrossFitters, like, people know what you're there for. When I was in LA for the CrossFit Games, no one knows about it. No one knows it's happening. No one that's not in that community cares. That's the reality of it. It'll probably be more similar in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where people just don't care or know as much that it's happening, versus a Madison that's a smaller market. It's like a market 80 something, and Dallas-Fort Worth is like 5. So that's the difference, right? You're going from a top 10 market, which is where it'll be, to what it was like when it was in a mid market, a market 80, and it's just a totally different event and how much people care about it. But I think one of the benefits is it'll be a little bit cheaper to get there. It'll be easier to get there. So I like that area. That's one of the rumors. I've also heard a little bit about a possibility of it being in Ohio, the Columbus area, I believe, where Rogue is located. And that would be very convenient for the fact that Rogue outfits the games. I was at the games this year in many years, but I spoke to someone from Rogue this past year, and he was saying they're trying to get rid of all of the equipment before they leave, as much of it as they can. They discount it a lot. They require that people take it, no shipping. And that's because it's just such a hassle to move that volume of gym equipment from Ohio to Wisconsin, which really isn't that far when you think about it. Like, imagine when it goes overseas, having to move it. So it would make sense to put it somewhere closer to the equipment. It would lessen the cost. And I think that's a big thing right now in the CrossFit space. A big thing that Don Fall is pushing for is to save money. And Don Fall is the CEO of CrossFit, if you don't know. But a big thing he is pushing for is to make CrossFit profitable and the games profitable, which it for many years was not. So putting the equipment closer saves money. And I think that's a big deal. That's a big bottom line. So those are some of the places I've heard. There's even more that people have speculated about. I think those are kind of the ones that are realistic, that may actually happen. If you've heard other locations, please leave them in the comments. I'm curious to see what people think before we actually find out. And I imagine that'll be sooner rather than later, because we need to know, right? So we need to know where we're going. Another rumor I've heard, less talked about than location, obviously, because the location thing we know is going to happen. We know the games are moving locations. But another rumor I have heard about is that the games may look different. We have a lot of divisions at the games right now. Again, that's another thing that costs a lot of money, and it doesn't bring in the same number of sponsors or the same number of eyes, and the games can't focus on getting the eyes on something like the individuals, which was aired on ESPN this year, and on all of the age groups. They just don't have the resources or time. So I've heard some rumors that age groups and different divisions may be going away. And I think CrossFit Games would be partnering with a group like Legends, maybe, the Legends competition, to have that be the CrossFit Games for the Masters athletes and the age group athletes, so that they don't have to happen at the games too. So age groups, the teens and the older individuals would all have their own competition, possibly Legends, where that's where the world championship of that happens. And that's all people are focused on, is the Masters. And it could be really good for the Masters, because I feel like at the games, kind of gets swept under the rug. It's not that people don't care about it and aren't interested in it and that there aren't storylines there, because there certainly are. It's just because there's so much already going on, you can't talk about it all. People are focused on certain things and other things just kind of get left to the wayside. And that's kind of what happens with Masters. And I feel like that's kind of what happens with the teams too. And I have spoken to some people that think in the future, the teams could have a separate competition from the individuals. So like this summer CrossFit Games would be just the individuals. And then we'd have a different competition for the age groups, like something like Legends. And I'm not sure where the teams would go, but I have heard some people talk about that they think that the teams may get their own competition too. I feel that it's more likely that sooner we'd see the age groups part ways, because there's already competitions that are very much focused on the age groups, like Legends. So I think that there's already a place to move that to, where I'm not sure there's as clear of a place to put the teams and make that the official sanctioned CrossFit Games event for crowning the fittest team on earth. I don't think we really have that right now, so I think it's a little bit harder to see where that would go, where I think it's a little bit more straightforward to see where we'd put the age groups to have them have their own thing. So I do think that's something we could possibly see. I do think that would save money. I also think that you could get sponsors specifically for those things and make more money off of those events if you focus things a little bit more. It feels a little bit unfocused having so many divisions at the games. It's awesome to see, it really is, but it's too much. There's so many divisions, just really hard for people to follow. And I think that's kind of why we saw really poor streaming of it too. There just isn't the resources to do all of that, to show all of that. And if they had their own event, they would have the ability to fund more resources. And the only other rumor I just want to mention, or kind of a rumor, is that we're going to see a lot more people at the games next year. A lot of names that we didn't see this year will be back next year. And I kind of talked about that in my previous video about who could win the 2024 games. I think we're going to have some big names back. Like I think Tia Claire Toomey is going to make her way back after having a baby. I think Ricky Garrard is going to heal up from his injury and make a return. Brooke Wells, Saxon Panchek. So we have a lot of names that just weren't in the game this year for one reason or another. And I think we're going to see them back in 2024. A little bit less of a rumor, but some of these people haven't announced their intentions yet. I guess most of them have, but I think we're going to see a lot of names we hadn't seen last year coming back. Maybe even I've heard some rumors about Rich Froning coming back and doing some of the Masters stuff, and maybe it'll be somewhere else. We'll see. So a lot of fun things to come. If you've heard rumors about 2024 that you want to talk about, please leave them in the comments below. I appreciate you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.